Many of the lessons in this class begin with inspirational quotes from Henry Ford, and I have one more to share with you. The best we can do is size up the chances, calculate the risks involved, estimate our ability to deal with them, and then make our plans with confidence. As I've said before, transmission repair is not for everyone, but if you have some mechanical skill, chances are high you can repair this one. There are some risks. You will have to invest time, effort, and money for parts, but I feel the potential satisfaction of fixing this transmission yourself is worth it. As we approach the end of this project, I hope this class has inspired you to move forward with confidence on your project. It's great to have you back. This is Aode 4R70W class, Part 2, Lesson 7, the final video of this class. In the last lesson, we installed several subassemblies: the reverse servo, 1 to 2 accumulator, 2 to 3 accumulator, case connector, or on earlier models, the wiring harness, selector shaft, and finally, a case filter. In this lesson, we take the final steps to complete the reassembly of the transmission. We'll disassemble, rebuild, and install the valve body. We'll also connect the wiring harness, install the filter and pan, bolt on the adapter or extension housing, and finally attach the lever position and output sensors. It's time for brain surgery. We'll take the valve body to another sterile work area. Position the valve body in front of you like this on a work surface with plenty of room for parts and tools during the operation. For clarity during this demonstration, I've removed most of the transmission fluid from this assembly. Yours, on the other hand, should still be as it was when removed from the transmission. It should be wet and not yet cleaned at this point. Place shop towels down to absorb fluid. On the right side, I have the tools we'll be using: mechanics pick, small and medium screwdriver, 10mm socket, ratchet, an inch-pounds torque wrench, the fluid bottle, and small needle nose pliers. I also have containers for small parts such as bolts and check balls. I have room on the left for the parts and instructions which we'll be using from the SureCure kit. I also have more room back here where I can set larger parts such as the cover and spacer plates after I remove them. To give you an idea of what we want to accomplish, let me flash forward and show you how parts are eventually laid out during the disassembly. I may have built you up for a letdown. As I'm about to point out, what we have to do is actually simple, easy, and not as intimidating as brain surgery. I unbolted the cover plate and set it here. I removed the torque converter clutch and shift solenoids and set them here. I removed this spacer plate, gaskets, and stiffener plates next and placed the bolts here. After that, I removed 8 check balls, this drain back valve, as well as a small screen, and placed them here. Except for replacing a few components with ones from the SureCure kit, This is the limit of the disassembly in most cases. Now let's go back and do it in real time. Begin disassembly by turning the body over. Use the 10mm socket to remove the 13 bolts which fasten the steel cover plate to the aluminum casting. There are two unique longer bolts here and here. They not only fasten the cover, but also function as guide pins when the valve body is installed into the case. Set the 12 short and 2 long bolts into a container. Lift the cover plate and gasket. Set them over here. Note that there are no check balls or other small parts under this cover which could fall out when we eventually turn the casting over. Remove the bolt which fastens the torque converter clutch solenoid and shift solenoid pack to the casting. This bolt is like the short ones which attach the cover. Place it with them. Use a small screwdriver to pry up on the shift solenoids. Set them here. Pry the TCC solenoid up and out. Set it here. Turn the casting over and position it like so. The next step is removal of the spacer plate here. If you can peel this gasket off, set it over here. If it's stuck to the plate, remove it later by scraping it off with a razor blade after we unbolt it from the casting. Remove the 9 bolts. There is one here, 4 through this stiffener plate, and 4 through another stiffener plate here. On 2000 model year and earlier valve bodies, an additional plate fastened with 2 bolts is located here, and they must also be removed. Set the plates here. Lift the spacer plate off of the casting. The gasket will probably tear. set it here. If any of the gasket remains on the casting, use a razor blade to scrape it off. Use needle nose pliers to remove the 8 check balls located in pockets within the casting. Lift the converter drain back valve out. Set it with the check balls. There is a small square filter screen located here. Lift it out and set it here. At this point, no further disassembly is necessary before cleaning the casting with mineral spirits. Before you do, take a few minutes to familiarize yourself with the retainers of the various spool valves. 4 of them, like this one, are a type of clip which are removed by prying with a pick. The other 6 are simply small steel plates installed into slots. They rely on spring pressure against them to stay in place if you turn the casting upside down. Carefully turn the casting over and watch closely for any to fall out. This gentle motion allows you to see where it falls from so that you can reinstall it. All of these are being held firmly in place. At this point, clean the casting, cover plate, stiffener plates, and bolts in mineral spirits and dry them with shop air. Also remove any remaining gasket material from the spacer plate with a scraper or razor blade and clean it too. After cleaning, make sure all spool valves can move freely. Use the pick to gently pry on each one. Spring pressure should return each one to its resting position. If any are stuck, remove its retainer and return spring. Then work the valve out with a small flathead screwdriver or the pick. Clean the valve and valve bore again with mineral spirits. Reassemble the valve, spring, and retainer and check it again with the pick. Here's a tip. After cleaning, a sticky valve can be freed up by lightly tapping the valve with a screwdriver and small hammer or ratchet. Only tap the narrower portion of the spool which doesn't contact the bore. By tapping at these angles, small burrs or raised areas in the bore can be knocked down, which will allow the valve to move freely. Once again, make sure all of the valves move freely. There are 6 components included in the SureCure kit which must be installed into the valve body to correct problems from high mileage. The back and forth cycling of spool valves is slightly abrasive, not only to the valves, but also to sleeves in which they move in. Some of them wear to the point they need replacement. There is also an end plug notorious for leaking after years of operation. This kit has replacement parts to fix these problems. I'll go over them now, but keep in mind that you should primarily read and follow the instructions included with the kit. The steps you take are well written, the illustrations are high quality, and the explanations clear up some of the mystery about transmission failure. Let's begin by replacing parts of the pressure regulator assembly. Use a pick to remove this clip which retains the booster sleeve. Keep a finger over it to prevent it from flying out. The sleeve has spring pressure behind it. Place your thumb over the bore to prevent it from popping out. This sleeve and inner valve are usually worn out. They'll be replaced. Set them aside. Work the spring out and set it aside. Finally, work the pressure regulator valve out. Get the new valve from the SureCure kit. Put fluid onto it. Install it by using the pick to push it completely into the bore. Replace the original spring. If your model has a small inner spring, install it too. Get the new booster valve and sleeve. Look into the end to confirm the inner valve is installed. Put fluid onto the sleeve and place it into the bore. Push it in further with the pick and reinstall the clip. There is a similar assembly located here which also gets replaced. It's called the bypass clutch control sleeve and valve. It's under spring pressure too, so place your thumb over it and push it in slightly. Work the retainer up and out with the pick. Remove the sleeve. The inner valve usually remains inside. If it isn't there, use the pick to retrieve it from the bore and place it into the sleeve. Set them aside. Remove this spring. Set it aside. Get this orange-colored spring from the kit. Place it into the bore. Get the new valve and sleeve assembly from the kit. Notice the very small hole in the retainer groove. The instructions recommend enlarging it with a 1/16 inch drill bit to prevent a harsh torque converter engagement. You not only enlarge the existing hole, but also continue drilling through to the other side of the groove. Use shop air to force the valve out. Set it aside. Now drill out the existing hole and continue through to the other side. Clean out all metal chips with mineral spirits and shop air. Add a small amount of transgel or bearing grease to the valve. Push it into the sleeve. It can be installed either end first. Put fluid onto the sleeve . Push it into its bore and replace the retainer. This end plug for the 2 to 3 shift valve bore has a reputation for unacceptable leakage and will be replaced. Place your fingers over the clip and plug. Pry the clip out. Spring pressure will push it out. Set it aside. Get the new end plug and one of the very thin O-rings. Install the O-ring into the groove and add some fluid. Push it into the bore and replace the clip. The last part to install is an end clip. We'll simply place it behind the original one here, which retains the solenoid regulator valve. This is the clip. Use the pick to push in on the existing clip. Set the new clip in like so. All of the parts from the Sure Cure kit have now been installed. There is a replacement spring included in the overhaul package which must be installed. Here it is. It's packaged separately and labeled 2-to-1 capacity modulator. The 2-to-1 capacity modulator valve is located here. Work the retainer up about 1/8 of an inch. Place a finger over the bore to prevent the spring from flying out and pull the retainer out completely. Remove the spring. Insert the new spring into the bore. Compress the spring with a medium-sized screwdriver. Turn the blade like so. Reinsert the retainer. Install the cover plate next. Turn the casting over. Get the gasket which goes between the casting and the cover plate. Here it is. Set it onto the casting. Set the cover plate into place. Get the two longer bolts which also function as guide pins. They go here and here. Tighten finger tight. Install the other 12 short bolts. We'll tighten these bolts further with a torque wrench later. Turn the casting over. We'll install the check balls, drain back valve, and screen now. The 8 check balls go into these pockets. There are replacement check balls in the overhaul kit if you need them. Now set the drain back valve into this recess. It can go either way. Finally, replace the small square screen filter which goes here. Get the new one from the overhaul package. It's packed loosely by itself. Place it here like so. Inspect the spacer plate to determine if it can be reused. It may have cracks which can lead to third gear failure. 2001 and later model valve bodies, like this one, were produced without a stiffener plate which up until the year 2000 was located here. Without it, the plate flexes and eventually cracks from pressure applied at this point from the 2 to 3 accumulator retainer. This plate looks okay, and since there was no indication of a problem with the direct clutch during the disassembly, I'm tempted to reuse it. But let's take a very close look. It is in fact beginning to fail. I can see 4 cracks radiating from the retainer contact point. They would eventually get larger, leak pressure, and cause third gear to fail. We need a new plate. This kit contains a replacement plate which is thicker and stronger than the original. Included is a steel cup to be placed over the pointed end of the 2 to 3 accumulator retainer. It spreads the load over a much larger area to give even more insurance against flexing and cracks. Follow the instructions which not only come with the plate but also the SureCure kit. The plate may have to be modified depending on vehicle. You may have to enlarge some holes with a drill. Let's install the cup now. Simply set it like this onto the 2 to 3 accumulator retainer. We need the upper and lower spacer plate gaskets from the overhaul package. 3 gaskets are in the kit. You'll find one upper gasket which is easily identified by the large holes which surround the stiffener plates. There are 2 lower gaskets to choose from depending upon the holes in the plate. Get all 3. Select which lower gasket to use based on whether or not this hole is present in the plate. As you can see, the original and replacement plates have a hole in this location. Select the gasket which has this hole. Here it is. Set it onto the casting. The two long bolts which fasten the cover plate act as guide pins to align the holes. Set the new plate into place. Temporarily set the upper gasket onto the plate so that you can easily locate the stiffener plate position and holes. They can only be installed one way. The cavities go down against the plate. Install the 9 short bolts finger tight. Remember, a bolt must be installed over here. Use an inch-pounds torque wrench and tighten them to 90 inch-pounds or 10 Newton meters. Turn the casting over. The last components to reinstall onto the valve body are the TCC and shift solenoids. I rarely have any trouble with the TCC solenoids in this transmission, and I'll reuse the original one. Push it into the casting. The shift solenoid pack, on the other hand, should always be replaced. We'll install this new assembly. Put fluid onto the O-rings and their corresponding holes in the casting. Push it down into place. Install the last remaining bolt finger tight. Torque all of these 10mm headed bolts to 90 inch-pounds or 10 Newton-meters. Put fluid onto the separator plate. Now set the upper gasket into place. The operation has been a success. Our patient will live. Let's take the valve body to the transmission and install it. Before installing the valve body onto the case, check to make sure the filter is in place. The cup on top of the 2 to 3 accumulator spring retainer is positioned squarely, and adjust the selector lever to about halfway in its travel. Turn the valve body over and set it into place. Make sure this gap in the manual valve engages the post on the selector lever. The 2 long cover plate bolts here and here once again act as guide pins, this time to position the valve body with the case. Get the 27 8mm headed bolts which fasten the valve body. There are 13 which are 1 7/8 inches or 48 millimeters long, and 12 that are 2 1/4 inches or 58 millimeters long. Also get the detent spring and roller, as well as a bracket which fastens the EPC solenoid. Organize them into 2 groups as you see here. Get the 13 short bolts and the detent spring and roller. Install them into these holes. The detent spring is fastened with a bolt here. Tighten them finger tight. Get the remaining 12 longer bolts and the bracket. Install 11 of them into these holes finger tight. This flat area of the bracket goes into a slot on the EPC solenoid. The last long bolt fastens it to the cover plate. Torque all of the 27 bolts to 90 inch-pounds or 10 Newton meters. Get the wiring harness. (1998) and later models use this type of harness. Align it with the pins on the solenoids and push it downward into place until it snaps onto each one as well as the case connector. If you are working on an earlier model, attach the individual connectors. Get the new filter. Put fluid onto the ribbed filter seal and the hole in the valve body. Push the filter down into place. Note the extension pipe on this filter. Always install this type filter if your transmission pan has a deep sump area. If the model you are working on has a pan which is completely flat on the bottom, use this type of filter which does not have a pipe. Now let's select a pan gasket. There is a new cork type pan gasket in the overhaul package which you can use. However, if your transmission had this type of gasket, reuse it. The rubber material has an inner metal backing which makes it superior to cork. You can clean and reuse it many times. After cleaning, place it here. At this point, clean the pan and the magnet located in this area. Set it onto the case. Get the 14 bolts which fasten the pan to the case. Install them finger tight. Finally, torque them to 120 inch-pounds or 14 Newton meters. Get the adapter housing, or if you are working on a two-wheel drive version of this transmission, the extension housing. You'll also need this gasket. Get the 6 bolts which fasten the housing. Torque these bolts to 215 inch-pounds or 25 Newton meters. The manual lever position sensor, as well as the lever, go onto the transmission next. Get them along with this nut and the two bolts which attach the sensor. Install these finger tight for the moment. Install the lever and nut. Rotate the lever clockwise to place the transmission into park. Rotate the output shaft to make sure the parking pawl locks. Now rotate the lever counterclockwise 2 clicks, which will place the transmission into neutral. Now remove the lever. Align the neutral mark on the sensor body with the one on the inner sleeve. The shaft is now correctly indexed with the sensor. Tighten the sensor bolts just snug. Reattach the lever and nut. Tighten this nut to 250 inch-pounds or 28 Newton meters. Get the output sensor and short bolt. Remove these two O-rings. get the new ones from the kit. Here they are. Install them onto the sensor. Put fluid onto them and the hole in the case. Snug the bolt. This completes the reassembly of the transmission. We've come to the end of the class. But before I close, here are a few tips. Your like new transmission needs a healthy torque converter to operate correctly. I recommend installing a high quality remanufactured one. Also remember to replace the O-ring on the dipstick tube with a new one from the kit. Finally, after reinstalling the transmission into the vehicle, put 4 quarts of fluid into the transmission before starting the engine. Add 6 more quarts after the engine is running. Begin checking the fluid level with the dipstick. You will probably have to add about 2 more quarts. That's it for this class. I've always enjoyed working on this transmission and hope you will too. I'm James Williams, and it's been my pleasure to share with you what I know about repairing this amazing machine. Thank you for watching.